Welcome to our Waldner Labcafé online, and thanks a lot that so many people are interested in this future topic. My name is Alexander Biller, and I'm looking forward to share a lot of inspiration with you. Our topic today, digital labs, trends to speed up laboratories. Digital tools in the laboratory are always aimed at increasing efficiency and throughput. To achieve this goal, artificial intelligence processes the data in the background to support the user in their daily work. The data is collected from connected devices or entered by the user using gesture or voice control. In order to make the results and the data accessible to the user, new technologies such as augmented reality or virtual reality are used to create an intuitive user interface. At this event, we will talk about the current trends in the laboratory, ask the question why and how the development of new solutions can be accelerated. The aim is to make future trends a reality in the next few years. And we have really fantastic speaker today. I would say we have the digital lab rock stars in our round. Impulse number one is about what are the top trends in laboratory digitization from Dr. Thorsten Gressling. Thorsten is digital chemistry transformation lead at Bayer Pharmaceuticals. He's guest lecturer at Humboldt University and he's co-founder of the startup Clever Lab that targets the smart lab of the future. Thorsten, it's an honor that you're here to share your lab vision of the future with us. Impulse number two is focusing on the question, why should we accelerate our labs into the next level? From Professor Dr. Michelangelo Canzoneri, Global Head of Digital and Data, Healthcare Business of Merck. Michelangelo is a proven leader in business transformation with over 15 years of healthcare industry experience, who is passionate about paving the way towards preventive, precision and personalized medicine through seamless convergence of science and technology, enabled by digitization and digitalization. Michelangelo, I'm so happy that you're on board to show us important modules to accelerate labs into the next level. Impulse number three is about how can we start into a smart lab world with Dr. Simon Bungers, and Simon is co-founder and the CEO at Lab Forward, a laboratory software company. Simon has a background in molecular biology and did his doctor at the Max Planck Institute of Experimental Medicine in Göttingen. Also part of the event is my colleague Moritz Walter, head of product management from Waldner. And Moritz studied mechatronics with focus on automation, worked for Fraunhofer in Stuttgart for 10 years, where he designed, programmed, and built equipment for human primary cell culture. Simon and Moritz, I'm so excited that you're part of our event, and I'm looking forward to see cool insights also live from the connectivity space in Berlin, an exciting place to prototype digital labs. At the end, we have a Q&A session, so if you have questions, please write it in the chat and we can answer them. So I would say, let's start. Let's rock the rock stars, take a good cup of coffee and be inspired. So Thorsten, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I will share my screen right now. And you said I would share a vision. So I will share some kind of reality, I hope so. Vision should at least be implemented one day. And that's what we are doing at Bayer. So thanks a lot. My name is Thorsten Gressling. As you said, I'm working for Bayer, currently located in Wuppertal. This is the factory on the right side you see. And I'm very happy to be in Wuppertal because it is the only production site from Bayer where we have research on one end and production on the other end. So today, mostly R&D and production is separated through all over the world, and that is a very good incubator we have right now there. So what I'm going to talk about is the idea of how digitization or transformation is brought to the laboratory, to chemistry, and to point out when we talk about digitization, we talk about conversion from analog to digital data. We don't have the appropriate word in German, digitization. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Digitalization targets more the processes and the culture and the orchestration of all that we have. And finally, the transformation. By the way, I don't like the word here. Maybe we will find one day a better word. Targets the level of consciousness, AI, information, and all that. So it's a very, very ambitious goal we have right now. But where is it to bring into the laboratory? Yeah, what is the fundamental topic we address when we're talking about that? And we're talking about experiments and observing the observable space, I call that. So if I'm doing experiments, of course, we have an idea. Yeah, I will paint that in blue. So maybe it is a theory we have that there is some kind of process parameters we have to tackle. And to understand that regularly, we're doing experiments. Yeah, so that is an experiment, for example, and here is an experiment. But of course, we do not have many resources. We cannot tackle every observation on this grid. And so the question is, how can we orchestrate our unit operations in lab? Yeah, heating, drying, filtration. We're mixing, we're weighing, we're measuring. How can we put all these unit operations into a good coverage so that we, from the, let me say, light observable space on the left side, go to a real dense observable space on the right side? Yeah, and by the way, what we have is in the middle here some kind of a, well, battleship. So we have a theory. Yeah, something should be happen there. Yeah, there is some kind of space we should look better to because we have assumptions when we're doing an experiment. Yeah, but in fact, we do not have enough resources to cover all this, and that's why we are going into the direction of the smart lab. We have different areas we have to tackle. So for sure, one of the areas is the digitization, where we get a lot of analog data into the digital space. Maybe it's what we tackle on the left side. So when we're going to digitization, we have our reactors, SysTech, for example, Metla Toledo. Yeah, we also have, looking to Simon, lab operator. But we also have robotics, for sure, where we have some kind of densify the observable space, having weighing robots, pipetting robots, but that's not enough. We also have the lab worker, and that's the smart lab we're targeting. And the question is, how can we bring the lab, the furnitures, yeah, and the worker better together? So we have a few topics here. It's voice, for example. We have robotic process automation, augmented reality, and things like visual understanding. And that's how we are going forward. So we use multi-channel AI to get a better digital twin of the lab. So it is between the lab, the environment, and the human being. So when we introduce cognitive interfaces, for example, talk to the lab, we can interact by gestures or something like that. We are getting more and more some kind of a immersive feeling interacting with the environment. And yeah, to be honest, it really feels like a new type of species. So when you go into one of our prototypes, sure, it is not ready right now, but a lot of things to do. You feel immediately some kind, in the first moment, you're a little bit of, well, what is happening here? But then later on, you get used to interact with the environment. And that is really cool. So, for example, why do I talk about cognitive capabilities? So that is a quite old graph. It's here from 2011 to 2015. The visual recognition, for example, proceeded more and more. So that means that from the error rate of 25%, from to 2015, which is a long time ago, we went below 5%, which is the average error rate of a human in visual recognition. And by far, it's 6 years ago. So meanwhile, it is really worth to talk about cognitive capabilities. Yeah, and that's just visual recognition. So when you see to the latest procedures of language models, huge language models, Google, and just published a new one. It's a really absolute great 175 billion hyperparameters. We're talking really about cognitive capabilities. And so we have cognitive channels to interact. So we have Amazon for listening. We have a open source software, Mary TTS, for talking. We have open source for viewing. Yeah, but we also add more things to the cognitive channels like temperatures or, for example, the pH value. Yeah, some kind of a cognitive channel that interacts with the environment. So you see here, adding channels to the smart lab. We do that by integrate that into the furnitures. Yeah, so looking into the details, so this is the lab worker, yeah, and this is the desk. And for example, here I put it in yellow. Here's a camera, yeah. So we also have, for example, microphone. This is Amazon Alexa. We have loudspeakers, yeah. We have done experiments with the Microsoft Kinect. And so more and more we interact with the environment, and that is what I'm talking about with cognitive channels and the smart lab. And that's, by the way, how we have to change our lab buildings. Yeah, and that's the real lab twin. So it requires integration of these cognitive channels into the furniture. For example, where to place the cameras, where to place the microphones. Currently, as I said, we have Amazon Alexa, but it's just a device that's putting on the table. That's not a good place. So that's where addressing, at least when we interact with the furnitures that are inside there. So what is the cookbook? How do we do that? How do we implement that? And it is very rough and very basic. So we start with a user story, which is original business process modeling language. This is an example. So we are really going into interviews, where we have a user story. Then the next thing is we map that into some kind of IT systems, which I call skill group, the ELN, the LIMS, time accounting, IT. And then we go more, and that's classic bot construction, to intense utterances and entities. And that's, by the way, how you also construct chatbots for customer interaction or something like that. That's very easy in the first place. And then when we have created the user story for our lab, we're going into the map that skills to these cognitive services. And for example, when you see the cognitive services, so on one hand, we have the skill name, for example, it's authorization, or when we talk about design of experiments. And then we're going into the classification. So for example, put that in red here right now, it's visual integration, natural language understanding, and so on. And by the way, we also have some cognitive channels that are quite unclear. For example, recognizing barcodes. Should be a visual recognition, but we're talking about that. So that is the mapping of the skills to the appropriate cognitive service. And finally, it is the real implementation step. Then we have the isolated AI services that, for example, for the bot integration or for the machine learning, when we have, for example, questions that the system needs to answer. And that is all then implemented within different vendors. So I've talked about Amazon, for example, but we also have our own services. And we spread that throughout whatever is best of breed there. That's all. That's the cookbook and how it's done there. So in the future development, we have different levels of that. So for sure, you get more and more complex patterns when you talk to your car, for example. It is very easy to say, hey, I want to drive to Berlin to, let me say, Simon's office. Yeah. But when you later on have some kind of reactions or conclusions, you need at least a layer architecture. That's what Tesla is doing right now. They're going into this layer architecture. And when you see on the right side of the picture, the more the level of abstraction you have within the construction of these environments, it's not tied to the lab, you can generalize that, you have more and more an AI layer. And that's why we need these big language models. Yeah. And so right now we are addressing the very basic layer. We call that the STEM or the M1 layer. And we have the IO where we have different devices. But later on, that's we're working on, we have reactions in the terms of that the environment reacts to the user in an appropriate way. And where, for example, we have a layer that is called the situation database and all that. So we're working on that in the next generation of our smart lab. And we need a lot of data. We need a lot of training data. And by the way, that's why Elon Musk has bought Twitter. It's about the data. It's not about free speech. Yeah, it's one of the best training data sets you will have in the world right now. Okay, but now we are focusing on chemistry, and so it's about trends. I will give you two trends that are now in our smart lab settled. So one of the trends is the Microsoft Mesh. That is what I like very much. This is my HoloLens, yeah, and we have done a lot of work with the HoloLens right now. So with the lab worker, it's not too heavy. It's easy to wear. You can have shared spaces. And I really can encourage you to get onto that because it's not easy, for example, to have a 3D model of the laboratory in the virtual space. Yeah, when you open the mesh, I don't know who has done that before, it is plain, it's an empty room. Yeah, and that's one of the things we're working, for example, placing the reactors, our sister reactors and the furnitures with a 3D CAD environment. That's one of the things. The other thing I was talking about is the Alexa Assistant. We have now reference implementation in Wuppertal and Bergkamen. It's not easy to do because if you say, well, okay, Amazon has 5,000 skills right now, just a few one are really suitable for the lab. For example, we have a skill, it's called Order Assistant. Yeah, I want to buy gloves, for example, or methanol. Please get some glasses. That's one of the skills we're working on. Another skill is data entry for the lab journal, Einwaage. For sure, it's in English. Yeah. German is not available right now because we use Amazon for Business for that. So we can finalize the entry in the lab journal and we can talk to the system in some kind of form of a dialogue. And a last example of a skill we have, it's together with a vendor of a machine, it's sister reactor. So show the diagram, start the stirrer, bring the temperature to 50 degrees on the endpoint, start the event frame, for example. That is control the synthesis reactor. And that's very interesting because we're talking about several dozens of skills we need to implement at least for the first MVP when interacting with a lab. And of course, we're in Germany. That is that we have to deal with surveillance potentials, with data protection. It is a big portion of the project work we are doing, for example, to assure that we do not record conversations, that we are in line with the hot work. Hey, I cannot say the word because the box is here. Silent monitoring is forbidden, no audit logs, and for example, we're working at training and qualification, how to act with your environment will be part of the personal CV of the lab worker. Good. So we have a social impact, and with that, I will go to the last slides of my slide deck. So the social impact, we are in talks with the workers' union, of course. They have to approve every step we do with the smart lab because it deeply interacts with the right way of working currently right now. And so we're talking about deep biometric data. For example, the HoloLens has an iris scan. And that's why we are following the, at least for Germany, the KI-Regulierungsprozess, which is one of the big initiatives in politics to be in line, at least with the legal requirements we're doing right here. Yeah, that's it. So thank you very much with this brief overview how Bayer is doing that. And yeah, now I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Thorsten, for this great overview and exciting examples. So if you have questions, write it in the chat. We can answer them at the end. I will directly hand over to Michelangelo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexander, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited being here with you guys to talk a bit about the vision in the future and why we are tackling this exciting topic of lab of the future or smart manufacturing. So let me share my screen with you. So this is about the tangible execution of our smart manufacturing vision. And before I get started, let me share with you the current state of the biopharma industry. So the pharmaceutical industry / the biotech industry. So this is an analysis, and this is based on a lot of different dialogues that I had amongst peers across the different industries, where we all got more or less the same challenges that we are facing at the moment. So in the healthcare industry, we are definitely serving our patients, which is about delivering the products, the services, the therapies that patients need. However, on the other end of this platform, you see, in this case, a Merck employee that is trying to go through different processes. And what we do is along those process steps to deliver the required drug. However, one of the biggest challenges that the pharmaceutical / biotech industry has is to identify the right drug for the right patient, and that tackling the one-size-fits-all towards a personalized medicine is certainly a big task. And so that the timelines that we have is also another challenge. As you know, most of the complex therapies or drugs that are developed take up to 12 years of development time to bring it to the market. On the other hand, it's also approximately 90% of the projects of drug projects that are starting in research don't make it to the market. And one single compound, the cost of one single compound, it comes up to $3 billion US. So why is that the case? What's the pain point behind that? And how can we actually accelerate that time, reduce the cost, and maybe also work towards personalized precision and maybe even towards preventative medicine? And if you look at what happens is you may have heard about silos in organizations and bigger organizations. So however, if I ask people whether they are working within silos, they say, yeah, well, I feel silos, but I'm not creating one. However, if everyone says that, I'm still wondering why that's the case that we're having silos. I think the situation is, in my free interpretation, is not about creating a silo. My free interpretation is we're focusing. We're focusing on our work, on our projects, on our task, and it's almost impossible to share all of the results, the data, and the information, the knowledge that you're creating with everyone within the organization. A, you may not know everyone, and B, it's simply too complex to know who needs which information at which time. So we're creating so-called data silos, which is so difficult to disrupt if you're not managing it properly. So people are working with each other, what you see in this picture, but it's actually beyond that. How do you connect those data silos? The next one is about creating incompatible technologies. It's actually a result of those focus where technologies are used for solving a specific need and pain point. But however, because of those activities and focus areas, this may evolve into having incompatible technology framework. Frozen information, you may have seen, certainly also in your personal life, that data and information is available. You know it's available, but it's so hard to get access to. You don't know who to ask, you know you need to have access. It takes time to get extractions, and maybe that extractions is not exactly the way you want it. So you have to do a lot of manual work to actually properly use that information. Next one is about the big data. Big data is a big topic. However, we have tons of data, but I'm not entirely sure whether we really use all of the data already. So you may use some of that data. That's what you see, the hole in the treasure box. And that already creates a lot of big value for the products and the patients. However, the question is, how do you scale? How do you use more of that data? And the unstructured data, which goes aligned with the frozen information, how do you actually get access to structured data, is a big topic also. And last but not least, not also mentioning cybersecurity, which is becoming more and more serious, more and more important if you're becoming more and more data going into the cloud and your algorithms and your models being stored there as well. The different understanding of what digital is, we know that digital, AI, and other buzzwords are becoming more and more confusing for people. So how do you demystify what digital is and getting in reality what the different pictures of what digital could be translates into a vision, for company vision, how digital and digitalization and digitization is used within an organization. And the fear towards AI and how AI could maybe replace my activities, my jobs, although you are under time and cost pressure and a tremendous workload. And last but not least, it's about an emotional response. I heard a lot about emotional responses. So you see here a person holding a book on the right hand and also a Kindle or another device on the left hand. And if you ask that person to read the content of a book on a Kindle, you may not necessarily get the same response. It's an emotional response. It's not about technology switch. It's more than that. It's actually addressing the change, the emotions towards using something and changing the ways of working. So if you think about the vision that we created, it's definitely creating a vision around our patients, putting the center of our patient in everything that we do. And with that, leveraging, of course, new technologies to getting deeper and better insights. But you also see that it's actually the opposite of what you've seen before. Fully connected data ecosystems, AI as an enabler, integrated technologies, having the full understanding what digital is for the organization and how we actually embrace it for more, and that our big data treasure box actually unlocked and structured data will help us to generate even more insights into the patients and unlocks the potential of personalized precision and maybe even preventative medicine in the future. And with that, having also fully emotionally engaged colleagues and employees and working towards that vision of creating this big impact for our patients. Now, how do we get there? From the vision to a strategy, so we created the so-called 10 key digital pillars. The key digital pillars is a framework. It's a framework where we believe that digital and data activities will elevate us and speed up our path towards that ambition, that vision that I shared with you before. It's about fast to POC. How do we get fast into clinics with in silico research, computational chemistry, synthetic biology, augmenting our clinical development activities, for example, with patient stratification, clinical trial design and success prediction, and digitally enabled patient safety. Digital insight generation is about disease understanding, having scientific insights and knowledge management. If you look at how many paper and scientific paper we have around the globe that are produced even daily, how do you get access to that knowledge? How do you extract the knowledge and contextualize it to your activities? Pharma 4.0 or Industry 4.0 related activities, release by exception, digital supply and forecasting, and many, many more. Next generation manufacturing process development, which includes the CMC activities and the activities in the labs, real world evidence and clinical trial data analytics, augmenting our sales reps, next generation reporting, next generation transversal content management, and last but not least, the future of healthcare, in my view, which is also about including, complementing the current operating model with digital health and therapeutics. Now, what we did is we looked into the broader organization and all of the beautiful, excellent examples of digital and data activities. And we combined them and we structured them along those key digital pillars. And so that we also see where we're investing, which impact are we generating, with clear KPIs and business cases, making sure that it also creates the value that we're expecting from those use cases and being able, with an agile approach, to steer properly. Now, let's talk about how to actually go from manufacturing to smart factoring. And if you look into the past, where always technologies have been used and data has been generated, information out of the data and knowledge ultimately, today, what the big difference is, it's not only the complexity that we're facing and the new technologies that we're getting, but also how to combine all of those dots, all of the data. So where do we want to go, right? We want to go flexible, so adaptive laboratories and manufacturing plants that can flex to meet changing demands, as well as testing and sample requirements. Paperless, all equipment and workflows linked to one application with all regulatory and data integrity requirements met. Automated, fully automated workflows and collaborative robotics with automated write-up of results. And descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So process simulations in silico methods and predictive analytics. For example, risk-based testing, risk-based modeling, and predictive maintenance, just to mention a few. So we created an ecosystem for smart labs and smart manufacturing, which includes the digital labs and plants, so sensing, digital twins, and OT, operations technologies, and its application of physical sensors and soft sensors to create plant and supply chain models, creation of digital twins, 3D model for visualization, and automation of production. Next is about advanced data analytics and AI-based analytics. So application of data science to optimize product quality, yield, production planning, batch sizes, and so on. Next one is about predictive maintenance, virtual and augmented reality. All activities related to plant maintenance, example are apps and mobile devices for technicians, augmenting reality for maintenance planning and downtime reduction. But also site logistics, warehousing, filling asset tracking, automation of transport and supply handling, supply to control tower, RFID, IoT for tracking flow of goods, intelligent warehousing solutions. Next one is about vertical integration, IT backbone and infrastructure, which is also a very important element of enabling everything that you see here above. And of course, last but not least, as I mentioned before, the change management aspect, business processes and trainings. So all tasks concerning people and their role in the digital transformation, training concepts and academies, effects on business processes. So what are the requirements that we defined? So it's definitely beyond existing organizational structures. So cross sites, cross-functional, cross-divisional. So data access is data democratization. It's also be prepared for data availability for health authorities, quality inspections, for example, in terms of data integrity. Sharing of defined data with partners, so in and outbound activities. And dedicated IT solutions are required to keep flexibility, efficiency, and scalability fully embedded into a suitable infrastructure to allow data retrieval, data access, and data analytics. So of course, we ask ourselves, where are the data generated? How to connect and access the data? Where to store and access the data? And all of that translates more and more then into findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. So the FAIR principles that are reflected, and to actually drive then the data-driven development. So that actually helps us from our vision to our mission. And this will help us to address topics such as right first time, increase scientific understanding, upskilling and capability building, and foster knowledge sharing. Recently, we have also published together with the World Economic Forum and a community the Manufacturing Data Excellence Framework, which comprises 20 dimensions, which has technology enablers, organizational enablers, and application areas. And if you start with the application areas, which is from new product introduction, supply chain, manufacturing engineering, supply chain management, production, logistics, quality, maintenance, energy and utilities, and health and safety, this is all enabled through the technology enablers, as for example, data extraction, data platform, data processing, and visualization, but also about connectivity and privacy and security. And the organizational enabler, which is also a key topic for us, is about having a strategy and a roadmap, a governance and processes, ecosystem of partnering, or your partnering ecosystem, your digital skills and capabilities, and legal compliance. How do we start? Of course, as also Thorsten said before, we start with key business stories. We have here a few that I mentioned: command center, CMC, regulatory power, and a few more. Then we started to look into the personas. Who are the right personas within that business story? and what are the journeys, the user stories behind them. And once we had that, we translated that, of course, also into one IT architecture and ontologies, so that we have actually also the transformation of the data linked to our raw data and the object and ontologies related to that, so that we actually can enable our vision. But of course, the digital continuum from manufacturing process development to commercial manufacturing is bigger than that. So it starts somewhere with benchtop synthesis, phase 1, 2 batches, 3 batches, validation batches, launch, and so on. So that complexity of having and solving different tasks within the lab/manufacturing environment is just highlighted here. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. It does show you how many different use cases, if you will, you have to actually address the different questions in the lab/manufacturing environment. And so that goes even deeper if you look into all the business opportunities that we have identified, if you look from the development and launch to the post-market activities, with end-to-end master planning, knowledge management, homogenization and vertical integration of technology tools, digital twin plannings, and so on. And then you have the digital enablers such as technologies, and we have here listed a few, governance, and people. And people is the most important piece. As I said before, that is about a capability, upskilling, and of course, a mindset approach, how we transform and get our skill sets for using that in the future. And how do we address the need for paradigm shift? Well, about through convergence of evolving process analytics and digital technologies. It's from batch, which is today, with multiple process technologies, to process analytical technologies, to digital technologies. And switching to intensified, reducing the amount of process technologies needed, then from offline to online, and from harmonized unit operations to orchestration process analytics, and also data analytics, so that you actually go towards also continuous manufacturing with near real-time process simulation, predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics. So it's an ever-increasing complexity along the drug development lifecycle. I think this becomes obvious. You see here some unit operations along the production of, in this case, biologics. And you see it starts with the lead optimization, where you go down and double click on this. You go on the DNA level, where you're producing a cell line, which is producing a stable cell line, development for example, a monoclonal antibody. Then you go into the drug substance development with upstream, downstream activities and formulation activities, then in drug product development activities. And you see that complexity in each of the different activities and labs, you create tons of data. However, they are not connected as such. They will operate and transfer knowledge into the next laboratories. However, the history of that drug, the production of drug, is essential when you go to the next step. So the question then is, how do you connect the dots? How do you get the data connected and contextualized in a way and accessible, again, in the FAIR principle, that you can start getting insights? Which of the parameters that you change, critical process parameters, have an influence of a critical quality attribute of your product? So that it really starts to get insights in how to tweak your processes within the labs that makes you smarter in producing your drug, but also faster and also maybe cheaper. This is an example of what we also did in next generation cell line development. And you see here that all of that, what I mentioned before, started to connect the dots in our data platform ecosystem with analysis of cell lines, stability, production, so that we really get smarter and way faster in doing this task only than in comparison to before. And of course, the smart manufacturing is then about connecting not only one lab within one lab, but across all labs of different activities. So it actually gives you the insights across the different labs, but also how you scale manufacturing process, how you transfer the knowledge, which we know is sometimes more tacit than explicit. So how do you capture that knowledge that is actually somewhere between the lines, so that you can then have your impact in terms of first time right, speed to tox studies, first in human or first in man, POC, and market. And having also resource efficiency in line with regulatory requirements and synergies and a collaboration across global R&D and manufacturing is actually the seamless integration between R&D and manufacturing activities so that it becomes an end-to-end development activity. And last but not least, I would like to share with you the digital twins concept that we're also tackling in terms of looking at the supply, product, plant, and processes, and to model these to actually help us to transform and to predict the way we work. And this is just an example of a bioreactor digital twin, of how digital twin is not only an electronic or a digital representation of a physical asset, but it's also using, for example, CFD, computational fluid dynamics, and more like models that describing the chemical reactions or the biochemical reactions, and how all of that makes sense, creating models, whether data-driven, mechanistic, or hybrid models, to really understand what's happening, and as a closed loop to transform and understand the complexity of our drugs and our products, whether it's in healthcare, life sciences, or electronics. So with that, I would like to stop my presentation with some key takeaways, which about smart manufacturing is the seamless integration and use of all data generated along the life cycle of drug development, from manufacturing process development to commercial manufacturing. Pharma 4.0 is the convergence of smart lab and smart manufacturing technologies and advanced and AI-based data analytics and automation with pharmaceutical regulations. Fix the basics and connect the data silos and ensure data security, availability, architecture, and quality. And last but not least, enable mindset of continuous curiosity and closed-loop iterative learning. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michelangelo. And thanks a lot for all this fantastic knowledge, insights, and of course, for the well-designed graphics. It's really beautiful. So I directly hand over to Moritz.
Thank you, Alexander. Hi, and welcome also from my side and Simon's side. So we'll share the slides. So we want to talk about how can we start into a smart lab world from the perspective of how can we start coming into doing and building the smart lab for the future. So on the agenda, we make a short introduction, and then we talk about how and some key points, and then we want to show you some learnings from Walton, and of course some learnings from Lab Forward about digital solutions for the lab and the smart lab world in the future, and then we finish with a conclusion at the end. So let's start with a really short introduction, as Alexander did this before. So my name is Moritz Walter. I'm head of product development. In my department is product management and the R&D department. So we're looking into the new technologies and how can we make a better lab furniture and a smarter lab from this perspective. From my background, I'm coming from the automation and software development direction. So I saw in the past that there are several points which can be improved on lab furniture and the infrastructure in the lab to tackle the new topics in the lab in the future.
And my name is Simon Brungers. I'm the CEO of the Lab Forward GmbH and also one of the co-founders. I have a background in molecular biology, did my PhD at the Max Planck Institute of Experimental Medicine. And at Lab Forward, we basically build software to assist researchers worldwide in the quest to make groundbreaking discoveries and build high quality products. So basically, we have a tool set of softwares for different different processes in the lab. Yeah, and with that, I hand over back to Moritz.
Yep. So let's start with a question. How can we start into a smart lab world? So how can we start? So what do we expect from a smart lab world in the future? So we expect it will be a more efficient and ergonomic way of working in the lab, and of course a safer way of working in the lab from the perspective of the FUMOD, for example. And also they are more regulated, and there will be even more accurate and precise ways of working in the lab required to tackle the new regulations in the lab. And we want to focus still on the important value-adding task and not to document every single step and prove that everything is done the right way. So this is a little bit going controversially. And what we know that the way we work in the lab will change with the new technologies and new solutions in the lab. So that will be not the same like in the last 10 years. So of course, it will not only affect the laboratory because there are other areas also involved in this change of the lab. So there will be other adjacent areas like automation, digitalization, which will affect the lab in the future. And of course, going into the future, there will be new disciplines and new technologies coming into the lab, and which we currently know, which currently other industries will know and will be or are currently not used in the lab, or there will be even new technologies which we cannot imagine right now, which will come into the lab and support us in working in the lab. So the big question is, how can we get started? How can we start with a smart lab? That's the next slide. So that is a central question. How do we get started? Not only thinking about the visions, but really get into the doing, start, try out, find out what's the best for the lab in the future. So I would like to show you 2 examples where we started in the last years with these visions to try out how the smart lab in the future could look like, what's usable, what's not so usable, and share our learnings with this. So the first would be the Lean Lab. So on the next slide, the idea was to have a smart lab furniture. That was the first idea, building smart lab furniture, a furniture which could be arranged every day, every week from the user without rebuilding the lab every time. It should have some installation-free and modularized free modular media supply, because this is something which is always built in the infrastructure and is not being changed so easily. And then there was the idea of having something contamination-free and controlled lab furniture, so you don't have to touch anything and spread your the contamination through the lab as you're working. So out of this vision, really started with cardboard on the next slide, building up lab furniture, how it can look like. So it really was cardboard, tape, building furniture, building a rearrangeable mobile media supply, for example, what you see on the left side. But it was a hackathon in Munich with about 20 people. These group of people were mixed out of students working in the lab, customers from us, and also people from the production of our side, from Waldner, and from the development research department, which came together in Munich and building in 1 week, trying to build in 1 week a new lab furniture series. So there were also tables, cabinets, which could be voice controlled, as you heard before from Thorsten, for example. This was also a cloud solution where we tried out how can you control tables and cabinets over your voice. Tables and cabinets could be controlled by gesture, by just waving your hand in front of the table or the cabinet to open it. And there were also already some ideas of optical status visualization, not only having screens in the lab, but also having different light colors to visualize which surfaces, for example, are contaminated or possibly contaminated, or which workspaces are currently occupied or which are free to work there. So all of this 1 week hackathon in Munich. On the next picture, we see the result. It was a lab, which you see here. It was 2 different types of tables, height adjustable. There were cabinets hanging above them. With gesture control, you could control the height and opening and closing the doors over your voice. We had on the left side in the background, there's the cockpit. It was called cockpit, where you had a big screen and you can enter your data you worked on or looked into your process, how you have to process your samples in the lab. And out of this 1 week hackathon, the bio kitchen, we then further developed the Lean Lab, where we included some user experiences and user ideas which came after this hackathon, what could be changed or what could be done better. So this is shown on the next slide, which is a little bit more lightweight, even more flexible than the BioKitchen. Looks like more a product. We kept the status visualization with the different light colors, but one learning was, for example, the voice recognition. That was a great idea, an easy way to implement this with Alexa in the first time, but it's always this topic cloud. Where's my data? Do I want to have someone in my lab who is listening possible all the time? So we tried in this prototype out how powerful are the local voice recognition softwares which run in the lab, which run on one device in the lab and does not have any internet connection. So to keep the information in the lab and try this here out. So at the end, there are some features, digital features in this Lean Lab implemented, like the opening doors and moving the tables up and down and controlling the media supply. But at the end, it's always a question, what are you doing with this information you have, and what are you doing with this capabilities of controlling something with other software? So the interface to other software is becoming very important, because really in this point you have an added value if you connect it to other software and work together with other companies and share the information, and also giving them the control of using your devices in the lab. So to show you the second example, that was a new fume hood, the Zickerflow Vision we are currently on. So there was the idea of having a fume hood which is almost invisible in the lab. That was also a requirement for the lab furniture, not so much for the digital part, but also there was economic and flexibility and workspace part there. How can we maximize the workspace and flexibility of the fume hood, and how can we integrate connectivity and data collection? So how can we make the fume hood smarter and more integrated into digital solutions in the lab? And you see on the next slide the process to get there. We started with the hardware part, so building a fume hood totally out of plexiglass, so it was almost totally transparent, and started to cover different areas to see how much transparency and how much can we cover to get this feeling of an almost invisible fume hood at the end in the lab. So we built a totally transparent fume hood and then covered it and went down to the to the necessary transparency you need in the lab to get this feeling. On the second point, there were a lot of discussions about these connectivity and integrated connectivity of the fume hood and getting information out of the fume hood. For example, there was a lot of discussion about the webcam. It seems too easy putting a webcam in a fume hood to observe your experiment, but at the end there were discussions about the position of the fume of the webcam, the field of view of the webcam. So what do you want to see on your webcam picture? You want to see something small in the fume hood, or you want just an overview of your workspace in the fume hood? So there were a lot of discussions and tryouts how to position the webcam and what do you want to see, and how can you, which webcam is the right webcam for this, for example. And of course, not only getting pictures out of the fume hood, there's also how to show data and visualize data on the fume hood. So there are discussions about the size of the screen, where to position the size, and of course the position of the screen on the fume hood also has an influence on the airflow inside the fume hood. So it gets into contact of this safety feature of the fume hood, so it can interact with that and make possible the fume hood not so safe as it was before. And of course, not only showing information, also entering information again with keyboard, mouse, or touch. How to position that on the fume hood, where the most ergonomic position of, for example, keyboard or mouse, or do you even need a keyboard? Maybe a touch screen is enough. So there are different solutions for different processes or for different customer needs, which has to be think about. And we tried a lot out and see what the best result is there. So of course, again, this is information, entering information and showing information. You need a software in the background And for that, you have to cooperate with other companies which has these software already in the lab and are more into these software topics, not so much in the lab furniture software, topics. So on the next slide, you can see the result of this building prototype. The result was the fume hood on the left side. It has more transparent parts, so the sides and the back side is transparent. As you see, the lower part is not anymore transparent because that came out of this prototype. That's not necessary. It does not make any difference for the user. It's even nicer for the user to have a half intransparent back side. We have airflow optimized add-ons like the screen is positioned on the right position, so it does not affect the safety of the fume hood at the end. And the status visualization, for example, there was think about having big screens on the fume hood, but at the end there's a light bar in the top of the fume hood, which indicates you is something wrong with your process, or are there errors, or is the process running? So that's, for example, a status visualization which can be controlled from outside from another software on our fume hood. And of course, other sensors are in the fume hood and controls in our fume hood, which can be connected and controlled from other software and can give other information and data to your process and enrich your results with this information.
Yeah, and when it then comes to the connectivity part of the furniture in a more broader sense, then that's where kind of the two of us started talking and like Labforward and Waldner, like had a look into what we could do together, and because I mean, we are a software provider at Labforward, and we have different tools that target different, like pretty, individual, steps in the laboratory workflow. Yeah, for example, an ELN that helps to plan and document experiments, kind of a small weight LIMS system to prepare materials and devices. And basically keep track of samples, and then also an IoT solutions that helps you to connect to devices and hardware, but also software, and also lets you to basically execute experiments in a guided way. But I mean, having these, let's say, products, we saw that it's not enough for us to be just a software provider. We know, basically, we identified that digitization is only one factor for smart labs. So basically, while digitization happens, there's more automation, more digital data management. Also, the environment of the lab organically changes around it, and of course, like also through other factors. And if you look at this from a historical perspective, and also look a bit in the future, in the past, you had basically rooms and buildings that were dedicated to research, which basically led to that you could exclude more external factors. Yeah, and you had pen and paper data management, which, because you could basically, which helped you to focus the basic things that record the basic things that were happening in these rooms or buildings. Yeah? And this was enough to basically pick the low-hanging fruits of science and build the first like quality controlled products, basically. Yeah? And in the present, you have a more tightly controlled environment, and you have digital data management. But those two things don't necessarily lead to that it's easier to work, or like more efficient to work. So like all the regulations, all the data transfers into the different digital systems take a lot of time and things like that. So basically, it's, you can pick the high-hanging fruits of science, but it takes a lot of time. Yeah? I mean, I think both Bayer and Merck noticed that it just takes a lot of time to develop a new drug and to get production right and things like that. So basically, looking into the future, and that's where basically for us, we identify that it's not only about the data management, which we in a broader term are focusing on, but it's also about like how the lab itself looks like. Yeah? And our vision there is really, it's a very fully controlled environment, meaning that you have that you can monitor every parameter, that you can basically, that the researcher doesn't do any recording anymore of what's happening around him, but that basically the laboratory, itself is basically recording all of that. I think that goes into the same direction as Thorsten was, showing this in this overview picture, where basically the lab is connected to like every entity, everything that the researcher is interacting with is connected to a big cloud or like to a big data management system, if I get the interpretation right. I mean, how it in the end will look like, I mean, just Googled for future lab. We don't know, right? But just to get the vision right. And that's basically what drove us to say, hey, we not only can focus on software, but we also have to look at the laboratory. And we tried, and actually together with Waldner, which was very nice, to build, a lab in the way that we build software, like in a very agile way, with like rapid prototyping and things like that. And we, got a lot of partners together, among them Waldner and others, and basically built a smart lab, or like a connected lab, in just 1 week. And I would just like to quickly to show you this video so that you can get an idea how, setting up this lab and getting into the smart lab world looked like for Lab Forward. And we actually called it the connectivity space. So that's why when I'm referring to a connectivity space, it's one, it's a space that we set up together with our partners. So basically it was 1 week where we really brought both hardware people and software people together from different partners, and started to build this lab. Did a lot of hardware work and really hands-on stuff. Also set up the place so that it's basically easy to record videos in it. Like we have a streaming, like a high, very high performance video streaming equipment here, so that we can also do live demos and things like that. And that is basically also the Waldner Fumer that we put up, and attached videos to monitor the lab. And in the end, we kind of presented the entire solution in a live stream, which was actually very well received, and got a lot of good feedback. And that's how it looks like in the end. We had that's already like now almost like 1 year ago when we did this. To basically just give you a short view how it looks like right now. You have basically one central island, of which this Fumer is really the one of the central pieces. And then we have different workspaces where we test new equipment, test new workflows, connect new devices. We tried out robotics here and like pipetting workflows, liquid handling, all these kind of stuff. Yeah. So it was really a nice. It's really nice place to work. And basically, what we do there is basically that we really use this for our internal hackathon, so that we get our people together. And it's like, especially when you have a growing company, like we also by now like 80 people or something like that, and people working on different products and working with different partners. Then it's really good to bring people just together in one room and get them to work, for example, on one use case of whatever, an ELISA workflow or something like that. Or like now we have at the moment we have like a lot of work on a GMP compliant ointment mixing. Yeah, so it's very like going deep into verticals of the individual lab process, and really helps to have the space to just like try out stuff. We also use it for our partners. So basically they book the space for demos or for off space or innovation workshops. And really the Waldner Fumer is one of the central like workstations that we use for showcasing casing. And also during this lab sprint, I mean, Moritz mentioned this quickly, we kind of really started to think also from the point of device connectivity and what does a lab data management software need. Yeah, so we basically added slots to attach devices so that they can instantly connect to our software. We added like a monitoring system with environmental sensors, but also like webcam and things like that. So if you want to just have a quick look into what you can do with this Fumit, what we regularly do is like workflow demos, for example, where you so how it looks at the moment. We have different equipment in the Fumit. It's all connected to like our software, to like directly, and basically can plug and play a device into the bench, and it's ready to go. And then we can basically run workflows and control the entire environment. So you just see how like Richard, our head of lab transformation, is operating on the Fumit. Actually, we can also control the Fumit itself. So basically switching on the light, changing the airflow, and things like that. Yeah, so basically this is also like, of course, very easy when you like, and that's why like when it comes to my mind, like when coming a bit to this controlled environment, like, I mean, the Fumit is basically like a miniature version of a laboratory. Yeah, so basically, and that's why you can also, in my view, realize the smart lab in the most easiest and quick way, because it's a confined space. You can control the environment. You can control everything that's inside it. So it's a good place to start with digitizing automation and actually making your laboratory smart. Yeah, maybe as a last version, I'm not going to show the video here. We also can monitor everything that happens under the Fumit, and of course, this also like generates new ideas. I think Thorsten also said this, for example, that you have visual recognition, what's really happening under a Fumit. Yeah, you don't want to just use basically the webcam for recording and controlling what people are doing, and for documentation. Maybe it's an interesting idea, but you can also use it for remote monitoring, so that you are notified when, for example, something like foam develops in a solution that you're mixing, when something basically goes out of the norm. I mean, this of course requires then, like, I think that's what one partner cannot realize. Yeah, so you need to like both I think the domain knowledge of like what can happen in a Fumit, like what are the chemical processes behind it and things like that. And you also need the IT knowledge, or like the software knowledge, artificial intelligence knowledge, to basically make sure that the cases, the events are recognized in a good way. But again, I think it makes sense to. It really helps if you just have some easy way to start with this, and yeah, that's what this environment that we generated here together with Walden and other partners offers. Yeah, so basically, yeah, there was the last screen I showed, basically just with this overhead camera, and that we are actually using this overhead camera also to do like virtual demos, which is very nice. So basically, we can let customers experience new use cases, new solutions that we built for them virtually, and don't have to basically go on site and demonstrate. This was very good during COVID times. Yeah, but in the end, I think what it comes down to more, it's maybe to dive into the conclusions, and I think we can basically do this in a shared way. I think what we both learned is that like starting lean and trying out things very quickly really helps, because if you plan, and of course you need to plan all those things, and also like this, we didn't build this lab in 1 week without preparation, let's say. Yeah, but I think you have to start somewhere, and during this process you will identify so many things that you need to that might be more important than the things that you initially planned. Yeah, and this is really what we identified through the process. Yeah. And then as partnerships at eye level, yeah, maybe Moritz, you want to?
Yeah, I think the important thing is that you really try out and not only think on the desk, what could be possible and what can be done, and then build it and then test it. So it's really a process of building it, testing it, seeing what's wrong or what can be improved. And there are a lot of learnings in the past where we thought, well, that's a perfect solution. Even with customers together, we both were, we were sure that that's the right solution, and we built it. And then we saw, well, it looks nice, and it looks nice on pictures and in PowerPoint, but at the end it's not usable in the lab. And you better forget about it and make it more easy, or make it more complicated, but then useful in the lab at the end. And yeah, of course, it's a partnership at A level is very important. So talk often over your ideas, and everyone has its part in the solution at the end. So everyone finds his spot and gets his advantages and be in his area where he is very good inside, and leave the other parts to other companies where to deliver the best solution then at the end.
Yeah, in general, what we identify through these things is like that there's actually, it's about when you do something like this, you basically see that it's not basically splitting the cake and everyone basically takes his share, but it's actually that when you do this, like when you do these partnerships at eye level, you see that you can expand this cake, because you see there's so many opportunities, there's so many new business models that you can try out, so many challenges that need someone to take care about, especially when you bring customers into the mix, that it's, it doesn't make sense to talk about, like to make sure that like no one is touching the business area of someone else doing in those things, especially in such a complex environment.
Yeah, at the end you are faster that way, because everyone does what he's good in. And then of course there's the interdisciplinary partners. Is important to take different perspectives on the same challenge, and that often brings new solutions, and then the ideas are supplementary know-how together, and you get better solutions at the end, faster solution and new solutions for that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think it's like that. If you look at it from the outside, like there cannot be something that is further apart than software and furniture, right? So, but actually, like through this partnership and through this approach, we also learned a lot from each other, and actually that there are like common learnings and challenges and learnings that we can benefit from.
Yeah, at the end, it has to work together in the lab. You have universal software for the lab, and you have a universal lab furniture at the end. So this has to work together in the lab for the customer, because the customer is working with both in the lab.
Yeah. And it doesn't make, it's like the point is actually also like when we are asked like, hey, actually nice that I can now run my my HPLC over a tablet, or like monitor or something, and then we are getting asked like, hey, but what tablet should I buy? Where should I attach it in the lab? How can I use it with plastic gloves and stuff like that? So the same probably also goes for you, Moritz, when you are asked about like, hey, how can I basically connect my computer in the field or something like that? So that's actually where we have to work together to provide value to our customers.
Okay, let's finish, Alexander.
Thanks a lot to you both, to Simon and Moritz. And thanks a lot for showing the development process and prototypes live from the connectivity space. And I think everybody's invited to come there to Berlin and make his own prototype to digitalize his own lab. So contact us, contact Simon or Moritz to come there. It's really exciting. So I would say for the Q&A session, I go back to Thorsten at first. So everybody's in the round again. So Thorsten, in your presentation you showed, what is the time frame where the digital twin is first fully working? Can you say something about that?
Yeah. Currently we are in the MVP status. And by adding skill by skill, it is like with the Chrome versions, it is working right now. So what we're struggling is for sure using visual recognition, because that is real hard stuff with the workers' union. That makes sense, by the way. I don't know where there will be this time scale. And what is also hard is scaling. That means if you have individual handcrafted a workplace, it does not mean that you can transfer it to another workplace. And that's what we're working on: scale up and transfer.
Okay, and how about the costs, Thorsten?
Yeah, the hardware cost is not much. So we have standard components like document cameras, which you get at Amazon for $50. The main cost is skills development. We now try to partner with vendors like LabVoice to become skills manufacturer. And of course, there's this standard IT integration stuff, because especially from legacy software, we have that. You don't have always good connectivity. So 95% is virtual.
Great. So the next question goes to Michelangelo. Michelangelo, what is the biggest hurdle when it comes to digital transformation in the biopharma industry, in your opinion?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think this is a tough one. Is it okay? I have some backup slides that I would like to share with you to actually answer that question. Is that okay?
Of course.
All right. So let me go to that. And this is, if you can see the screen, okay. It's actually asking the question, why do 9 out of 10 digital transformation projects fail? And that's not me quoting any, it's a quote from an analysis from McKinsey research, and a research article from 2018. These numbers may change now, right? But there are, based on this analysis, there was the analysis showing coming up with 9 out of 10 digital transformation fail. Well, the answer is because it's more than just a technology task. And while applying Scrum only does not make us agile, and I've seen that a lot in applying agile is also equal to Scrum, which is not the case. Scrum is a framework, it's a process, it's a methodology, and it helps us to working agile. However, agile is based on something else. Now, the secret behind a successful digital transformation is not thinking about a product, but thinking about capabilities. If you think about a product, that's the way you would start to implement and start building it. However, the customer in the meantime might not be necessarily happy until the product is final. And at the end, if you talk about capability, I want, in this case, coming from A to B, you're not thinking about a car, you're thinking about a capability. And if I start now building it agile with the agile values and the principles, you start creating products, minimal viable products that start to make meaningful sense, or lovable products. So whether it's a car, whether it's a bicycle, whether it is a skateboard, whatever it is, it brings you from A to B and includes the feedback from the end customer into the process. It's important to include the end customer into the process, especially if you are learning. And digital is about learning. And it's also including the the Agile Manifesto values. So that is Agile. Agile is about values, and then it's complemented by processes. But individual interactions, getting them very close over processes and tools, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan, right? And having a working software over comprehensive documentation. Don't get me wrong. Everything that is written on the bottom is not bad and it's not unnecessary. It's actually the opposite. We need it, but it should be, if I need to negotiate, I would always go with the top ones. And we know that we always go through changes. And if we go through that changes, we go through that curve. We know that curve. Every single change, we go through that curve. However, we assume that everyone goes a similar way to that curve. What we know, though, is that based on the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, they are individuals. Humans are individuals with different preferences. Just communicating it doesn't help us to go through that change. So we need to take the humans into the consideration of a change. And that is what is showing that we have different people and personalities when we address the change. It's not one person only, and certainly not the same personality than myself. So don't expect that people just do it because I understood what to do. So including that change is important, and that is the biggest hurdle when you do a digital transformation.
Thanks a lot, Michelangelo. The next question comes to Simon about the connectivity space. How do customers perceive the connectivity space, and how close are the innovations you showed to the current needs of laboratories?
Yeah, interesting question. So because we, what we see here and what we try to do is to basically be as close to the customer as possible. Yeah, and the thing is that, of course, like some of them like really experience something entirely new here, right? Like that there is, I mean, I think the round that was presenting here today is like used to new solutions, trying out new stuff, yeah. But most laboratories are not. So customers that come here and see basically that you can automatically control your stirrer and record the data and work with a robotic arm and things like that are quite impressed at first, and then actually it starts to that they bring up new ideas and have new ideas and basically how to fit what we show as an innovation, how to basically maybe even scale it down a little bit so that it fits their use case. Yeah, so it's very it seems to be like sometimes far away at the start, but they basically manage to get it down very fast, and that's actually, I think, cool. Why we also like, I mean, we're not showing like all these like super advanced stuff like AI and voice recognition and those kind of things. We can do, we tried this and things like that. But what the customer really, or like what people that really visit the space are really impressed in is the things that they can basically take back to their bench and implement right away. And that's why kind of, I think we found a good middle ground in this connectivity space.
Great, thanks, Simon. A question to you, Moritz. How long does such a process take from the idea to the finished product?
Well, it depends. I think it depends on how the topic is driven in the company. That's the most important thing. Is a top-down or bottom-up topic, and is there a project in the background or a real problem, or is it just an idea? That's actually, it depends on the time, and then you have to get the right capacities together in a short range of time, and really get them working on the topic and not get them working on the topic for several hours, a month or so. So if you have a compact workshop there over 2 to 3 days with a group of people who is really interested in this topic, and there's a project and a problem really behind it, you can really achieve big goals in that time, as you have seen with the bio kitchen, for example. But if it's sometimes there are bigger problems or bigger topics which has to be tackled, and that's might be there can be process times about months or even years. For example, in the last example with the Fumo, there was about 2 years, but that's a bigger topic, and there are several small topics inside which has to be tackled and had been solved in that time. So it really depends on how it's driven in the company, right capacities in a short time, getting together, concentrated in this time, working on the topic, and then you go for it.
Thanks a lot, Moritz. So I look to the time, and the last question goes to Thorsten. Are there more emerging technologies not considered in your presentation? Can you say something?
Sure. So all the candidates, for example, blockchain, yeah, in laboratory, because we have more and more spread working environments, and how can the consistency of the data be assured? Yeah, and and I want to point out especially that the laboratory, as it is for us, is where the software is running on. Like Tesla is building his cars just for running software on it. That's the paradigm shift we have, and maybe that's the main conclusion, that we're not talking about the lab as a combination of a stirrer and some lab devices. It is the hardware we are running skills on, and that's the main paradigm shift that Bayer has.
Thanks a lot to you, Thorsten. Thanks a lot, Michelangelo. Thanks, Simon and Moritz. great insights, great examples, cool graphics. I think there was a lot for our audience. And if you have more questions, you can contact us. If you want to start in a digital or in a smart world, you are invited to Berlin, to the connectivity space. Contact us. It would be a pleasure. And I look forward to our next Waldner Academy event. It's on the 15th of June. It's about the next level. It's automation labs, next level of high performance. And my guest will be Andreas Traube from Fraunhofer IPA, the Institute for Production Engineering and Automation. Dr. Andreas Müller from HTE, the high throughput experimentation company from BASF, and Professor Dr. Volker Nestle from the Life Tech division from Festo. It's also a good round. You are invited. Please register, and thanks to our speaker again, and have a nice day. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.